and welcome back to the F2 show. I'm your host Fraser Ford, and joining me to review all of the action from this weekend, we have commentator and journalist Adam Weller, we have Inside F2 writers Lawrence Griffin and Inside F2 writer Michael McClure. Coming up on the show then, we reflect on a great weekend of Formula 2 action as Formula 2 returned to Spa for the first time since 2020. Some great performances this weekend up and down the paddock. We review some of the standout performances. And we take a look at this weekend's results and what they mean for the championship standings. Okay, Adam, great to have you with us. First time on the show, isn't it, for yourself? What have you made of the season so far?
I mean, it's been Drugovich's season, really, hasn't it? Felipe has been mightily impressive this year in Formula 2. I think that it's not unprecedented for him to take a championship lead and go, right then, I'll see you all later, but not necessarily in categories as competitive as Formula 2. I think the storyline for the rest of the F2 season is going to be who signs him first and for what in 2023. But fabulous to be here with you guys for this vodcast, whatever the children call it. And this should be a good little discussion. Certainly, I'm the least knowledgeable person here, so this should be entertaining.
I'm sure that's not the case. I know you know your stuff, Adam. What did you make of the action this weekend? Obviously, a great weekend for Felipe Drugovich in terms of the championship. A great weekend for Jack Doohan in terms of results, wasn't it?
Well, it was certainly Doohan's best weekend of the season so far, obviously, with the double podium and the win today. I thought it was a very interesting little social media stirrer on Saturday at the end of the sprint race when you've got the mechanic from the team saying to him, see you in F1, but that, I understand, refers to the pit lane, the F1 pit lane at Spa, as opposed to him suddenly being granted the Alpine seat, but people are talking about that as well. In terms of the action this weekend, though, obviously it wasn't two races where they set the world alight in terms of action, but certainly I think come the end of 2022, Spa is going to be one we talk about as perhaps a turning point.
Yeah, definitely a big weekend in terms of the championship. Lawrence, we spoke on the preview show earlier on in the week about how much we missed Spa last season, didn't we? And obviously we're glad to have Spa back on the calendar for this season. Was you glad to see, Formula 2 cars flying up Eau Rouge into Radion earlier on today?
Absolutely. It's an iconic track, and it's one of the stalwarts of the calendar, really, one of the original tracks back since the 50s in Formula 1. So to see Formula 2 cars racing around there again is really a joy. There was moments where it looked like we were getting a few DRS trains developing out there, but there was enough going on in both races to keep us entertained throughout. And as Adam alluded to, really significant in the championship, big swing to Felipe Drugovich with just 3 rounds left now. So it really is, it's still just about possible for Porsche to make a comeback now, but it's becoming an even steeper mountain to climb for him now.
Yeah, we're going to delve into that in a lot more detail shortly. Michael, Formula 1 announcing that Spa's returning to the calendar for next year in Formula 1. Hopeful of seeing Spa back on the Formula 2 calendar next season as well?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, Spa is my favorite track of all time. There's just nothing like seeing a car go through Eau Rouge, take that double left-hander into Puhan. It's a newer corner and a real driver's challenge, or even Blanchimont, which has had some reprofiling as well in the runoff area. So a really great challenge for the drivers, and you can tell they're looking forward to getting back to racing. It's the start of a triple header, and what a group of 3 races we've got coming up with Zandvoort making its F2 debut in Monza. So absolutely hoping that it continues. Obviously, every time we go to Spa, there are the very sad memories of Antoine Hubert's death. But again, that's something we go there to honor him every time we race there. And I think it's a very powerful statement every time we appear at Spa as a Formula 2 paddock.
Absolutely, and I think the drivers absolutely did that this weekend. Okay, let's take a look at the championship standings off the back of this weekend. Felipe Drugovich is sitting pretty at the top of the standings after extending his lead to 43 points. Tough weekend for his rival Théo Pourchaire. He may be feeling his hopes of winning the championship are fading slightly. Jack Doohan's feature race victory and a strong weekend moves him within 6 points of Carlin's Logan Sergeant. They sit third and fourth. Liam Lawson and Enzo Fittipaldi round out the top 6. And the team standings. ART still lead the team standings despite scoring just 3 points all weekend long. Carlin moved to within 12 points of them in second. Strong weekend for MP Motorsport. They remained in third. Opposite for High Tech. Bit of a poor weekend for them. They remain in fourth. And a tough weekend as well for Prema. They stay fifth with Virtuosi rounding out the top 6. And as always, the full standings are available on our website, www.insidef2.com. Okay, yeah, as we've said, an incredibly important weekend for the championship this weekend. Obviously, momentum changing slightly, isn't it? But before we get onto that, Jack Doohan, our feature race victory, getting the undercut on Felipe Drugovich, and it worked nicely, Adam, didn't it?
It really did. I think that the strategy call there was about as good as it gets, and obviously we saw similar for Drugovich yesterday as well. They made a very good call to make the pit stop during the safety car period. Obviously in Formula 2, more in the single-seater ladder generally, I should say, so much of what your future holds as a young driver is whom you get paired with, not even just what team you're in, but which mechanic you get once you're in that team. And if you can see someone consistently getting the right strategies and the right calls, the anti-Ferrari, as we might call it, then, clearly they're onto something.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's really, really impressive. A double podium this weekend as well. Obviously, second in the sprint race. Lawrence, Jim Kimberley, Inside F2 editor, said that he thinks that Doohan's weekend this weekend was the second most impressive weekend of the season so far. Obviously, that being behind Drugovich's double win in Barcelona. Would you agree with that, Lawrence?
I think there's certainly an argument to be made there. It was a really, really good weekend for him. He had a strong drive to be in the sprint race, and that feature race was executed absolutely perfectly. And he's got his just rewards for it. He's vaulted up the order in the championship. He came into the weekend in 9th, and he leaves in 4th, which just tells you how tight everything is in the second half of the top 10 at the moment in the championship. And it's not been an easy season either for Jack Doohan so far. As he said in the press conference today, it's been a long, rocky road to his first feature race win. He, way back last year, if you remember, he qualified P2 in Abu Dhabi, and he took pole position in the very first race of the season in Bahrain, and everyone was talking about Jack Doohan, and is he going to do the same thing that Piastri did the previous season and walk the season? That he looked so brilliant in that first qualifying session, but then things just haven't gone his way, and it's taken him until the 11th round now to get a feature race win. So what a relief for him, and a really deserved victory for him this weekend. Like you say, that undercut just working to perfection for him. He kept close to Drugovich throughout the first stint, and then when he came into the pits, he just set this blistering pace, and everyone, I think, was fearing for him in the latter stages of the races with high degradation round Spa, fearing that the tyres might fall off the cliff and he could be eaten up. But actually, he built that gap. It got reduced as he was coming up to overtake Amaury Cordial and his teammate Marina Sato. And even after that, when Drugovich had closed in, he pulled that gap back out again and finished really strongly. So it's really starting to go in the right direction finally for Doohan. And now he's not actually far from Sargent. He could yet finish as the highest rookie this season. And if he performs well next season and puts on a good title challenge, he could be looking at an F1 seat come 2024. So, yeah, good times for Jack Doohan.
It's literally what I was just about to say to Michael, that he is only 6 points away from Logan Sergeant now. Motorsport is a funny old thing, isn't it? We're talking about Logan Sergeant, what a season he's having, and being linked with an F1 seat potentially. Jack Doohan maybe not having the best of seasons, as Lawrence has alluded to. A lot of pressure on him maybe at the start of the season when he'd had such a strong outing in qualifying in Abu Dhabi, pole position at the start of the season as well. He is only 6 points away. He's picked up points in all of the last 5 rounds. He's now got a feature race win as well. Has he finally found a little bit of consistency in Formula 2? And will he be eyeing up the P3 in the standings? Is that realistic for him, Michael?
It's funny because last round at the Hungaroring, Jack told me that, he wanted to finish in the top 5. And there we are. He's got a shot at P3. He said it was unrealistic with what happened earlier in the year. But, Doohan's had such a strange season because the first 5 rounds, he qualified every single race in the top 3. And he's never had that outright pace since then. He's not, as far as I know, he's not actually been in the top 3 since Monaco. But there's been a change, and now he's driving with a lot more control. Those little rookie mistakes, small errors that he was making earlier in the year. We look at Baku when he had broke the front wing. With Bahrain, obviously did that in the feature race and admittedly lost the win there. Even Jeddah with that collision in the back. He's cut a lot of those little issues out, and now we see a driver who's in harmony with the team, in harmony with the car. And it's wonderful to see him coming alive. Spa is a circuit where he does go well. You look at his absolute domination of that weekend last year in Formula 3. That's where he kicked off, really turned around and made a title challenge against Dennis Hauger possible. I think he's done the same here. He's made it a strong claim for himself to get top rookie honors. What this means for the future, I don't know. Will he continue in F2 next year? I would assume. He said previously he wanted to just do 1 season. Now it's looking like a second year will be possible. But I mean, he and Sargent have to come in as the favorites next year based on what we're seeing this year. It's almost hard to imagine, like, if Doohan had this pace, would Drugovich even be running away with this? I think Doohan could honestly be fighting for the title if he hadn't had such difficulties at the start of the year to be like 17th after 3 rounds, and now he's up in 4th.
Yeah, completely agree. He's got title contending form right now, hasn't he? So it's a shame he did have a rough start to the season. Okay, let's talk about the championship battle then. Terry Pourchaire had momentum coming into this weekend, but as we said, yet again, momentum has swung back in Felipe Drugovich's favour. 43 points even, the gap now. How important has this weekend been in terms of the championship battle, Adam? It's a game changer, right?
Any non-finish at this time of the season is huge, and obviously the bug bit Pourchaire today. There's 3 rounds left to go, so we are running out of time for a gap as sizable as 43 points to come down. I think that I don't think it's over by any stretch of the imagination, but it's going to take more than Drugovich to just sit there and have average weekends. He's going to need to have all-out misfortunes between now and the end of the season, because at this stage, it does feel like it's his to lose.
Adam says it's not over. Lawrence, agree?
Yeah, I do actually agree. I think it's absolutely not over because we were talking before the feature race that there was only a 25-point gap between the 2 drivers, and now all of a sudden there's 43 points, and that's how quickly things can change, and they can swing back the other way. Drugovich could have misfortune, as Adam says, but I think that's the only way in which Pourchaire gets back into it. The way he's been driving, Drugovich just not performing seems incredibly unlikely given how consistent he's been. Let's say he goes to Zandvoort next week and has mechanical failure during qualifying. That could see him start at the back in the sprint race and the feature race, and he could have he could potentially have a pointless weekend. We don't know how easy it's going to be to overtake in Zandvoort. And if that happened and Pourchaire won the feature race and got good points in the sprint, he could then be well within striking distance by the time we get to Monza. And then, the whole sort of story of the season could be completely turned on its head. But it would need something as dramatic as that to happen to turn it around now. Pourchaire would have to drive absolutely out of his skin for these final 3 rounds to overturn that advantage, because I just don't see Drugovich not turning up and dropping points just purely through a lack of speed, because he's been so good. So it's not over yet, but by the time we get to Monza, it could be game on or game over.
Yeah, definitely. I think it still is game on, isn't it? But it's a long stretch. But, by Formula 2 standards, we wouldn't write it off, would we? Definitely not. Michael, you're talking about Jack Doohan and Virtuosi being in perfect harmony. I think it's fair to say Felipe Drugovich and MP are working in, they have been all season long, and they were in 2020 as well, weren't they? There's something about MP that and Felipe Drugovich. It just works really well. But it was a bit of an inspired move, wasn't it, by MP to put him on the softs in the sprint race, which catapulted him up to P4, and he went on to finish ahead of Théo Pourchaire, who Pourchaire started P3, Drugovich started P10. It was a gamble that paid off, wasn't it?
To me, that will kind of be, I think, an image that defined the season. We had several of those this weekend. Pourchaire with his head in his hands in the pit lane is one of them. Drugovich getting by Pourchaire is another. And, that call was quite risky, because imagine if Drugovich had come in and no one else had pitted. Think about what happens there. Drugovich gets to the back. Does he finish in the points? We won't know. But I mean, it worked out well for MP. It was one of these, smart calls that worked. And I think in terms of gelling with the team, it's true. If you watch, Chasing the Dream came out over the summer break, and there's some great quotes in there from MP Motorsport staff, where they're saying they wanted Drugovich to stay in 2021. And obviously things changed. He went to Virtuosi. It didn't quite work out, and they were just so keen to have him come back. And it really feels like that sentiment is mutual. Another interesting thing about Drugovich's junior career, it seems like driver who is very much dependent on his relationship with the team. Carlin in 2019 in F3 was not good. Carlin in F3 is not the strongest team, but that partnership really didn't work out well. Go back 2 years before, he's with Van Amersfoort, another Dutch team in Formula 4, and doing great. So it's very much up and down for Drugovich. You never really know. And I think that quality, the fact that he's, maybe a little bit of a mercurial driver in some ways, very much dependent on fit, it makes him a risky bet. But this year, I think I agree with Lawrence. Something could change, but it's got to take a serious issue. Pourchaire has kind of used up all his Joker cards at this point. Drugovich can afford a non-score weekend completely. And even if Pourchaire takes full points, he's still got the lead. So that really just illustrates it. After Zandvoort, I think we'll have a clearer picture, and for sure after Monza, we'll know where things stand. But it's definitely looking like 95% sure that Drugovich is gonna seal this one by Abu Dhabi.
39 points available per weekend, 43 points is the lead. I think Zandvoort next weekend is a massive weekend, as you say. Lawrence, I saw your article on Inside F2 website about Felipe Drugovich, still focusing on F1 or potentially an F1 seat for 2023. What chance do you think that he has of an F1 seat?
I think his chances now are relatively slim. There is quite a chaotic situation in the F1 driver market at the moment, and hopefully for him, amidst that chaos, the fact that he's not attached to a junior team gives him the chance to sort of shop around for a potential suitor next year. But one of the things he was saying that is perhaps not a full-time seat that he would have, maybe he tried to get in as a reserve driver, as a test driver, and then, maybe in the way that Piastri has, hang around for a year, build that experience, build a relationship with the team, and then jump into the seat once the opportunity becomes available. But he also said that he doesn't quite know where he'll end up yet. That's absolutely still his focus, is Formula One, but he can't guarantee it, and no one can guarantee where half of the midfield is going to be in Formula One next season, the way it's going at the moment. So yeah, it's a very tricky situation for him. But I think this is just what happens when you're a driver in your third season, and there's almost the expectation with that experience that you're going to perform. So that you have to perform so well to exceed expectations and to really impress people. It's almost like the deck's a bit stacked against him this season in that sense, because he's driven phenomenally. So hopefully he can have a good few rounds and impress the bosses in Formula One. But I think his chances are getting slimmer and slimmer by the day, really.
Yeah, it's a tough one, isn't it? For me, I feel every Formula 2 champion deserves the chance to step up to Formula 1, but obviously we've seen in the past that isn't always the way. Oscar Piastri, Nick De Vries, hopefully Drugovich isn't another one that ends up on that list. Théo Pourchaire, we'll speak about him just briefly. I know we've spoken about the championship battle as well, but take away the fact that he DNF'd in the feature race, Lawrence. As we just said, perfect opportunity now in the sprint race to get some good points under his belt. He started P3. Jehan Darubala not starting means that essentially he was P2 on the road. Drugovich starting in 10th, but he didn't have a great start, and he ends up finishing behind Drugovich. Do we need to be critical there and say for a championship contender at this point in the season that's not good enough?
I think that's maybe a little bit. That feels a little bit harsh on him, especially after his retirement in the feature race. But no, you do want to erase those little errors when you're trying to win a championship, because it can be the smallest of margins that decide it in the end. But it was only a small error. It wasn't like he got an awful start. It just wasn't great, and that left him really exposed. And with having nobody in P2 almost, Drugovich was so far ahead that he didn't really get any toe up through Eau Rouge and over Raidillon. And he just got eaten up along the Kemmel Straight, and he was powerless to defend against the cars behind. And then that's where he sat for most of the race in P5. And then, of course, Drugovich comes flying through on his brand new softs, and he sees Drugovich and potentially his title hopes go down the road. But it's sort of small potatoes in the sprint race nowadays with how few points are available on offer. The difficulty with his weekend was always going to be had in the feature race after he qualified in 8th. That's really where I think you can level criticism at him. But like I said, I don't want to be too harsh, because you saw how upset he was after getting out of the car when he had to retire, not having the opportunity to defend, not even defend, to attack the cars ahead and to try and make a good fist of the race. That's really devastating for him, and he knows how significant that is. So I think you can be critical of him, but in terms of what's caused his season to go wrong, has it been him or has it been reliability? I think a lot of it has been reliability and misfortune for him.
Yeah, it's. I suppose that brings us on to the point, Adam. Should we expect more from the Formula 2 cars, the Mechachrome engines? There has been a little bit. I've seen fans on Twitter saying that, and I know Twitter, I know, but for fans, for the Formula 2 cars at this stage in the development of Formula 2 cars, should they be a little bit more reliable to maybe have a bit more of a? We don't want Formula 2 championships being decided by reliability, do we?
It's not just the fans. I mean, you see the journalists in the paddock saying much the same thing. We shouldn't see championships decided. We shouldn't have effectively the consistency of the data that the junior single-seater ladder gives F1 teams and teams in the broader motorsport world. We shouldn't see that data hampered by the fact that, these engines from Mechachrome, the car in general, just seems a little bit of a ticking time bomb at times. And again, you sit here now, the discussion we're having, mathematically you want to say, well, it is Drugovich's championship to lose, but there's also that little, I guess, suspicious lizard brain part of you that goes, yeah, but he has only retired once this year. Is it coming? I do think there is something amiss with the car in its current form. I really do hope, given how far into its life cycle it is, that, the next generation car, whenever that comes, is better, because frankly, no, I don't think it's good enough. I don't think it's fair on the drivers. The level of capital that goes into an F2 season, I don't think it should be such an X factor.
Well, the drivers were actually asked about reliability in today's press conference, and Jack Doohan actually said, well, throughout the race, when he got into third gear, he had reduced power. So he either had to shift down to second, where he would otherwise be in third, or short shift up into fourth. And then I think it was Liam Lawson who had basically the same sort of issue in qualifying. And Felipe Drugovich said that he lost power on his laps of the grid and managed to get it sorted out, but then felt like he was low on power on the first lap. So these sorts of niggling issues, you wonder how often those have been happening
often
for the drivers.
I've heard things. It doesn't sound foreign. Exactly. Let's put it that way.
No, and Doohan made the point. You get to the end of the season, and everyone remembers who wins, and people rarely go back and think, hang on, this guy didn't even get the chance to prove himself in 3 races. And it was quite nice of him to mention how harsh that is beginning to look for Pourchaire, and how unlucky he was this weekend.
Yeah, it's The engine retendering process for Formula 2 will be an interesting one. Let's say that. Michael, Liam Lawson, double podium this weekend, and actually a really strong weekend for him, wasn't it?
Yeah, probably his best weekend this year. I mean, at the start of the year, he had that win in Jeddah, obviously, and then the double podium in Bahrain. But this was the one where he looked like he'd finally come back after that very difficult spell that he had in May and in June. And he was just not qualifying well, sort of in the lower reaches of the top 10. And then, of course, Logan Sergeant took off and kind of left him in the shadows. So it's going to be a great confidence boost for Lawson, who I think has really recaptured that form that everybody expected of him. I mean, he was widely touted as a title contender. He's a driver who adapts so quickly to all sorts of cars that he drives, whether that's, single seaters, his first race he won in F2, or even in DTM, which he won on debut and tragically lost that title, very likely would have been his in the final round. So a source of controversy, I'm sure, but Lawson would definitely have been looking to make amends. And we saw that this weekend. The one thing that is still dogging him is qualifying. Logan Sergeant has been in the top 3 on pole positions, and Liam's just not quite up there. He admits it himself. It's been his weak point. Whether he can turn it around now that he's got, a double podium under his belt into this last part of the season, I'm not sure. I know that Carlin is supportive of what he's done and recognizes that he's gone through some tough times. But I think it'll come, and I think he is another driver. We can't count him out from this battle for third place. Second's probably too far up the road now, but I mean, with the form he's had, he's almost caught back up to Logan Sergeant in the points. So I'd say it's game on for Lawson, and definitely someone who this weekend with his AlphaTauri run is certainly lining himself up, if for nothing else than to continue in this reserve role at Red Bull in 2023.
Yeah, absolutely. Completely agree. Is this the form that we're expecting from Liam Lawson all season, Lawrence? I mean, he had a great start to the season, didn't he? 3 podiums in the first 4 races, as Michael's just alluded to. Had a bit of a drop off in form between, through May and June. But he seems to have found his mojo again, doesn't he?
Yeah, I think Michael's absolutely right. It seems like it feels like he's back now. It feels like we're seeing the best of Liam Lawson again, which is so nice to see, because he has struggled for parts of this season. He's had points finishes in every race over the last 3 rounds now, and 2 wins, 1 feature race, both sprint race wins, and a podium in that time. And so that's definitely been an improvement. He looked really strong in that feature race. The car was properly hooked up, as he said. And he had a solid feature race, and I think it shows that he's building confidence. That he said actually he'd hoped for better. He'd hoped to have gained more positions off the start, but he got sort of held up on the outside, and then that slow pit stop cost him the chance to really have a go at Drugovich and doing ahead of him. So yeah, I think Liam Lawson is back fighting at his best, but as we've sort of alluded to with Drugovich, he's in that awkward place now of being a driver in his second season. If he goes into his 3rd season next year, even if he wins the championship, does that necessarily do enough to impress the bosses in F1 or in the Red Bull Junior driver program, which is so competitive, which is so full of talent? If there's somebody coming up from F3 into F2 next season who also impresses, or somebody like Jack Doohan who impresses in his 2nd season. So it's going to be really difficult for him, but hopefully he can start to reproduce those performances more consistently throughout the rest of this season and into next season.
Michael, are you expecting to see Liam Lawson back in Formula 2 next season?
That's a question I should probably ask him. I don't know. If I had to wager a guess, I'd probably say no. But there is one thing that he is lacking, and that's a feature race win. He's not gotten one over his 2 years in F2. And that's, I think, something that even these rookie drivers, even in the Red Bull program, Hauger and Iwasa have both got it. And that's the thing that's missing. If he gets it, I think he's got a much stronger claim to an F1 seat. But without that, it's so difficult to judge what he's going to do because, I mean, quite frankly, reverse grid win, not the same. You're not managing the tire degradation in the same way. You're not managing a strategy. And you're also not managing it over that longer race distance that is more comparable to what you'd see in Formula One. So there's a case to be made for either one. Perhaps it's something where if he doesn't do the 3rd season, he's never going to be at the level where someone would take him. But there's a huge downside with that. We see it with someone like Drugovich, who in his 3rd year isn't. I mean, that's maybe what's tanking his chances. Same as with Nick De Vries. Same as with really anybody go back in history. Davide Valsecchi, all the way back in 2012, had a great season, but was in GP2 for perhaps too long and sort of spoiled his chances. So is a really tough call for Lawson and for Helmut Marko to make. I'm curious to see what happens there, but he does have to look behind him because you mentioned F3. Well, our championship leader in what is a thrilling battle there is a Red Bull Junior and is a rookie. And Isaac Hadjar is someone whom Helmut Marko wants to fast track into Formula One by 2024. So that's the name to watch, I'd say, if none of the current F2 guys work out. Keep an eye on what's coming below, and Lawson for sure will be aware of that.
Yeah, tough weekend for Isaac Hadjar this weekend, but what a talent he's looking in Formula 3 this season, absolutely. Adam, I want to talk about Logan Sergeant. We mentioned his name a few times on the podcast, but obviously a big crash in the sprint race. Glad he's okay from that. A pretty, I want to say average, but that's quite harsh on him, but a pretty, I will say average feature race. Are his chances of a 2023 Formula 1 seat slipping away from him all the time he's putting in weekends like this?
I think the quotes vis-a-vis Nicholas Latifi from Williams this weekend tell a story on that front. I don't think it would hurt Logan to do another year in Formula 2, to be honest. I think if I were looking at building him as a long-term prospect, I'd want him to get that second year in F2. But to swerve back to our earlier point, F2 is such an unknown quantity because, you get a dud unit and, pop goes your reputation. So I can see why the likes of Jack Doohan are sat there going, yeah, I just want to do 1 year, one good year, smash the emergency button, get into Formula One. It's a shame it's like that. I think back in the GP2 days, we gave some good examples, say Davide Valsecchi, but it wasn't unheard of that people could still ply their trade, for multiple years at the second tier of junior single-seater racing, get up into Formula One. I think the combination of the lack of Formula One seats, 24 cars, please, and the nature of the car in F2 is just making it such a poison chalice to stay in long term. So, yes, I think a second season in F2 would work for Logan Sergeant in theory. In practice, I'm scared what tool he'll get in 2023.
Yeah, really difficult one, isn't it? Speaking of drivers who, maybe are enjoying Formula 2 in multiple seasons, Ralph Boswong, Michael, gets a podium on his return to Formula 2. Obviously, struggled with that neck injury all year long. What a story that is. And by the sounds of it, he's going to be staying in Formula 2 next year as well.
Yeah, Ralph is making a lot of noise about beginning what would be, I believe, his 7th different season in Formula 2. He debuted in 2017, the very first year of the championship, which is, he's such a fixture in this paddock at this point. But, as much as it is great to see him back, it is a very poignant story. And what Ralph has gone through the past few months illustrates, I think, several issues in motorsport that aren't often highlighted. First of all, we talk about, injuries. He didn't really know necessarily what his injury was until later. And it's not the first time that we've seen this, that a driver has fought through injury to try to retain in the car, even through illness. We see it sometimes. So that's disappointing that, Boswong has felt this pressure, that he's had to withdraw and put Campos in a very difficult position, not through his own fault, but just, gets in the car and realizes I can't do it. And it was a wise decision for him to withdraw from those races when he did back in May, and then ultimately to, temporarily call time on the season in July. But he gave a quote. I asked him in the press conference about this, and he gave this quote that was, I'm going to read it. He said, I took the decision to make an evaluation with the doctors the week before Spa to see if potentially I could make a comeback. But then actually it was kind of in between. Well, they said it would be better to come back in Monza because they feared that the triple header would be too much for the neck. And instead of going along with that, he said he had some discussions with his sponsors. And in order to negotiate his future, he felt that he had to come back in Spa in order to kind of have a representative sample of races for them to determine what to do going forward. So he was caught in between a rock and a hard place, really. Does he miss out on these races and potentially lose that sponsorship that is so important for him to continue? Or does he come back, take that risk, potentially re-injure his neck, potentially put himself in a position where he can't race long term? I don't know what decision he'll take. He's even admitted as much that he might not be at Zandvoort. And if this is how he goes out with a reverse grid pole in a podium, I think you can look back on it with a smile. But it's a scary situation, really, because you don't want to compromise your own health in these cars. Every time you get in there, you're taking a lot of risk. And I just hope for Ralph's sake that, he's not going to jeopardize his future, because he is, even though he's got a lot of his speed through his experience, he is a quick driver. He struggled with budget early on. And I think without that, he could have, he had some very impressive drives in GP3 back in, 2015, 2016. Very, very good pace. And, in a smaller team, I think it was with Genzer potentially at the time, he could have, with that kind of talent, he could have been knocking on the door of F1 if he hadn't run into budgetary issues. So he's someone that I think we look back on it in 5-10 years and we'll look at it and see, where did motorsport go wrong? I think he's a case study in that of both an inspiring story of raising his own sponsorship and managing his own career, and also at someone who kind of fell through the cracks.
It's such a shame, because it feels like, especially towards the end of last season, beginning of this season, every time Ralph Boswong steps in a Formula 2 car, he's somewhere around the top 5, isn't he? So it's such a shame. And as you say, I think we'll look back on Ralph Boswong's time in Formula 2 as, one of those drivers who, could have made it potentially, but injuries are getting in the way of that, which is a real shame. Okay, guys, that's all we got time for today. My thanks to Adam, to Lawrence, and to Michael for joining me on today's show. If you've enjoyed the show, make sure you give it a like, subscribe for more Formula 2 content. Let us know what you thought in the comments section. Hashtag the F2 show to get involved in the conversation on Twitter at F2 Inside and on Instagram as well at Inside Formula 2. But from me, Fraser Ford, and all of us here at Inside F2, we'll see you next time.